Jasmine Crockett wasn't trying to start a firestorm. The panel was supposed to be a discussion on immigration policy, border security, and the ever-familiar political divide surrounding who gets to be called American enough. But something shifted the moment a conservative commentator attempted to wrap Melania Trump's immigration story in a red, white, and blue bow, using her as a shining example of a so-called model immigrant. It was a typical deflection tactic, one that Crockett had seen too many times. But this time, she wasn't letting it slide. Asterisk, as the panelist rattled off praise for Melania, calling her a symbol of the American dream and proof that legal immigration works, Jasmine sat still for a moment. Her body language changed, calm, but focused. Then came the words that cut through the studio like glass. Remind me again, was Melania a love story or a visa arrangement? The silence that followed was deafening. Asterisk, Crockett wasn't targeting Melania out of spite. She was challenging the narrative, the one Donald Trump and his loyal defenders have used repeatedly to justify policies that are harsh, exclusionary, and often downright cruel toward immigrants who don't look like Melania or come from countries deemed favorable. Trump, during his presidency, and even now, has continuously vilified immigrants from Latin America, Africa, and Muslim-majority nations, painting them as criminals, invaders, and threats to American culture. But when it came to Melania, a Slovenian model who came to the U.S. under circumstances many still question, the tone changed entirely. She was beautiful, legal, and deserving. There was never any talk of anchor babies, chain migration, or fraudulent marriages. Just glowing praise and silence on the details. Asterisk, Jasmine Crockett wasn't about to ignore that contradiction. She knew that by invoking Melania, the other side was trying to paint immigrants with a brush, dipped in selective acceptance, and she called it out for what it was, a double standard rooted in race, appearance, and proximity to power. Her challenge wasn't just rhetorical, it was aimed directly at the hypocrisy embedded in the political rhetoric Trump had normalized. Asterisk, what shocked people wasn't just what she said, it was that she said it on live television. No filter, no scripted lines, just raw honesty. And that's what set Donald Trump off. Asterisk. When Trump heard the clip, and sources close to him confirmed he did almost immediately, he erupted. Witnesses said he started pacing, ranting about disrespect and fake news, and demanding that someone shut her down. He took to his social media platform, lashing out at Crockett in all caps, defending Melania's honor, while doubling down on the phrase, "She's an immigrant," as if that automatically exempted his wife from public scrutiny. What Trump failed to realize, or chose to ignore, was that no one was questioning Melania's right to be here. The question was whether he and his supporters only respect immigration when it looks like Melania, and not like the millions of people who come from less privileged or photogenic backgrounds. Asterisk. The moment exposed a core issue. Republicans like Trump love to weaponize the image of the good immigrant, someone quiet, white adjacent, traditionally beautiful, and apolitical, while condemning others who dare to ask for the same dignity and legal process. Jasmine Crockett's sharp words ripped the mask off that tactic. She wasn't attacking Melania, she was putting a mirror up to the narrative Donald Trump has pushed for years. Asterisk, the fallout was immediate. Conservative pundits rushed to defend Melania, calling Crockett disgusting, classless, and racist. An ironic twist, considering the years of racial attacks leveled at the Obamas and other public figures of color. But Crockett didn't flinch. She tweeted shortly after the segment, refusing to back down. Being an immigrant doesn't make you immune from critique, especially when your husband has used his platform to demonize everyone else who walks a similar path, just without the private jets. Asterisk, this wasn't just a viral moment. It became a turning point in the conversation around who gets to be protected under the immigrant label. Trump's angry response only reinforced the very point Jasmine was making, that his version of patriotism and legality was soaked in double standards. Donald Trump's outburst wasn't about immigration policy. It was about image control. And that image happened to be tied to a woman who has been kept carefully out of the political crosshairs for years. Melania Trump. When Jasmine Crockett raised uncomfortable questions about Melania's immigration journey and marriage on live television, it wasn't just a critique, it was a disruption of a narrative Donald Trump has spent years curating. Asterisk, for Trump, perception is power. He spent his entire political career weaponizing appearances, especially when it comes to his family. Melania was his symbol of class, beauty, and legitimacy, someone he could point to and say, "See, I love immigrants. I even married one." That one sentence became a shield, not just against accusations of racism or xenophobia, but against the human cost of the policies he championed. When he signed executive orders that separated children from their parents at the border, he didn't speak of empathy or concern. Instead, he bragged about strength. But the moment anyone so much as questioned Melania's immigration timeline, he reacted like someone had smashed a glass sculpture he'd been polishing for years. Asterisk, so when Jasmine Crockett bluntly asked whether Melania's story was about love or logistics, a question many had tiptoed around, Trump snapped, Sources close to him say he demanded immediate responses from aides, not about policy, not about defending immigrants, but about crafting a response that would protect his wife's image and, by extension, his own. Asterisk, he didn't lead with logic, he didn't offer transparency. He defaulted to outrage. In a series of all-caps posts, he screamed about how Melania was a beautiful and legal immigrant who came the right way, avoiding the very real point Crockett was making. She hadn't called Melania illegal. She hadn't even questioned her citizenship. What she had done was challenge the narrative that Trump uses immigrants when they serve his purpose and discards them when they don't fit the picture. That truth was too much for him to tolerate. Asterisk, it was never about Melania's green card or visa history. It was about the fact that Trump's immigration policies, cruel, often arbitrary, and deeply racialized, stand in direct contrast to the leniency and privilege his own family received. His father-in-law and mother-in-law benefited from the very chain migration process he claimed to hate. He railed against birthright citizenship while his own son, with Melania barren, gained it by birthright. The contradictions pile up, and Jasmine Crockett simply pointed to the most obvious one. Asterisk, Trump's emotional reaction revealed how fragile that image really is. Instead of standing behind the immigrant community as a whole, or using the moment to highlight his wife's path as a broader symbol, he narrowed his defense to one woman. One exception, his wife. In doing so, he confirmed what Crockett was getting at, that he doesn't respect immigrants. He respects a certain type of immigrant, and only when they serve as political value. Asterisk, Jasmine's words weren't a personal attack. They were a mirror, one Trump refused to look into. His meltdown wasn't about Jasmine being wrong, it was about her being uncomfortably right, and that's why he lost it. Asterisk, for years, political opponents had avoided dragging Melania into discussions. She was considered off-limits, a protected figure. But Crockett wasn't attacking her for headlines. She was spotlighting the hypocrisy of a man who's built a political platform on division and fear, while selectively shielding his own family from the same scrutiny. And once that shield cracked, Trump's rage poured out. Asterisk, the louder he yelled, the more people paid attention. Crockett didn't say anything new, but she said it plainly, without fear. And on a stage Trump couldn't control. That's what made him spiral. He wasn't upset because a lie was told. He was upset because the truth had been said too clearly, in a space he couldn't dominate. And in that moment, it was clear. Defending Melania wasn't about defending immigration, it was about defending his image. When Jasmine Crockett refused to apologize for her comments about Melania, Trump's immigration history, and her marriage to Donald Trump, it wasn't just an act of defiance, it was a statement about the shifting tone of political accountability. For years, critics of Donald Trump have danced around his personal life, especially when it came to Melania. She was treated as off-limits, as if questioning her background or marriage would be crossing an invisible line. But Crockett wasn't interested in maintaining the unspoken rules that protected Trump's image. She was more interested in exposing the hypocrisy that had shielded him for far too long. Asterisk, Trump has built his brand on bluster, bravado, and ruthless counterattacks. He's lashed out at political opponents, mocked disabled reporters, insulted veterans, and fueled conspiracy theories about his adversaries. But every time someone even vaguely referenced Melania, his tone shifted from smug superiority to unhinged anger. That pattern didn't go unnoticed by Crockett. And when she raised the issue live on air, she wasn't looking for shock value, she was demanding consistency. If Trump was going to use his wife's immigrant status as a political trophy, he should be willing to face questions about how that status was earned and what it meant in the larger context of his own policies. Asterisk, the aftermath of her comments could have gone the way most controversial moments go. Media outrage, a flurry of think pieces, and eventually, a forced apology. But Crockett didn't blink. She didn't offer a carefully worded statement. She didn't retreat into silence. Instead, she doubled down with conviction, tweeting that being an immigrant doesn't place someone above critique, especially when that person benefits from a system their spouse worked hard to weaponize against others. Her refusal to walk back her words sent a clear message. She wasn't afraid of Trump, and she wasn't going to tiptoe around the contradictions he desperately tries to bury. Asterisk, Trump's reaction confirmed everything she was pointing out. Instead of responding with substance, he leaned into rage. He lashed out at her publicly, called her disrespectful, a disgrace, and mentally unstable, using the same recycled insults he throws at women who challenge him. But what stood out wasn't just his familiar pattern of hate, was his inability to address the actual issue. He never denied that Melania's immigration path was complex. He never acknowledged the irony of his family benefiting from policies he claimed to hate. He just screamed, hoping volume would drown out the truth. Asterisk, Crockett's decision to hold the line resonated with many progressives who've grown tired of Democrats pulling punches when it comes to Trump. For years, opposition voices have played it safe, sticking to policy critiques and avoiding anything that could be labeled personal. But Trump never extended that courtesy. He made politics personal. He insulted families, questioned loyalties, and degraded entire communities. Crockett wasn't mimicking him. She was responding with clarity and moral courage. She knew Trump doesn't respect restraint. He exploits it. By refusing to back down. She disrupted a long-standing tradition of deference that Democrats have often shown, even when faced with obvious hypocrisy. Her stance didn't just challenge Trump, it challenged the notion that his family should be shielded from the consequences of his rhetoric and policies. If he wants to point to Melania as proof that immigrants can succeed, he needs to answer for the double standard that elevates her while vilifying others. Crockett's boldness also highlighted how the conversation around Trump is beginning to change. The public appetite for holding him accountable not just legally, but rhetorically is growing. People are no longer content with politicians who dance around Trump's contradictions. They want directness, unapologetic truth, and the willingness to say the things everyone else is thinking but too cautious to voice. Crockett gave them that, and in doing so, signaled a turning point in political discourse. Trump's fury didn't diminish her credibility, it amplified it. Every insult he hurled only strengthened her point. Every tantrum only proved her right. She didn't need to go low to expose him. She just told the truth in a space where truth is often sacrificed for political comfort. And in that act, she showed that silence isn't strength, it's surrender. And she wasn't about to surrender. Not to Donald Trump, and not to the fear he tries to instill in his critics. The moment Jasmine Crockett brought up Melania Trump's immigration status, and questioned the authenticity of her marriage on live television, a deeper and far more uncomfortable conversation took root. It wasn't just about one woman's journey to citizenship, it was about how America treats immigrants based on how they look, where they come from, and who they marry. And at the center of that conversation was Donald Trump, a man who has spent nearly a decade branding himself as the champion of the real American, all while selectively uplifting certain immigrants as model examples and demonizing others as threats. Crockett's remark peeled away the polished veneer that the Trump family had so carefully maintained around Melania by pointing out the contrast between how she is treated and how millions of others are vilified. Crockett asked a question many have whispered but few have said aloud. Why is Melania Trump considered the ideal immigrant while others, often darker-skinned or less wealthy, are branded criminals and invaders? The question wasn't just about Melania. It was about the deeply ingrained double standards that define America's immigration discourse. Double standards Donald Trump has shamelessly exploited. Trump's entire immigration platform was built on fear of people from shithole countries, as he infamously described them, fear of people crossing the southern border, fear of Muslims, of refugees, of anyone who doesn't fit the narrow mold he's deemed acceptable. He pushed policies that tore families apart, implemented travel bans based on religion, and cheered on walls and cages. Yet at the same time, he held up Melania and his wife, born in Slovenia, as proof that he was not anti-immigrant. It was a strategic deflection, not a genuine defense of immigration. Melania's journey to citizenship has always been murky, and any attempt to explore its details has been met with hostility from the Trump camp. But Crockett wasn't concerned with legal specifics as much as she was with the symbolism. Her question struck at the heart of the problem. In Trump's world, an immigrant is only worthy of admiration if they are white, European, soft-spoken, and non-threatening. The rest are cast as liabilities, burdens, or dangers to national security. Crockett wasn't asking the country to cancel Melania. She was asking the country to recognize that the bar shifts depending on who's being judged. Trump's reaction only drove that point home. Instead of acknowledging the unfairness in how his rhetoric separates families while shielding his own, he doubled down on defending Melania as beautiful, legal, and perfect. Those words weren't accidental. They were chosen to highlight the very qualities he expects Americans to find redeeming. They weren't about her immigration story, they were about her marketability. The irony is that Melania's family reportedly benefited from the same chain migration system Trump campaigned against. Her parents came to the U.S. through family sponsorship, a process he called horrible and dangerous when referring to immigrants from other parts of the world. That contradiction has never been addressed by Trump. Instead, he uses Melania's story to silence criticism, as if her success somehow justifies the suffering of countless others turned away under his policies. Jasmine Crockett's boldness forced the issue into the spotlight. Her willingness to point out the inconsistencies in how immigrants are portrayed shattered the comfort zone many media figures maintain when discussing the Trump family, and more importantly, she refused to let the conversation be reduced to surface-level patriotism or superficial praise. The fallout from her comments was fierce. Conservative media scrambled to portray Crockett as unhinged or disrespectful. Trump's supporters accused her of attacking a gracious first lady, but not once did they answer the actual question. Why does Melania's path to citizenship get celebrated, while others facing similar or harder circumstances are met with scorn? That silence was revealing. Trump's political survival has always depended on the manipulation of identity, who belongs and who doesn't. Crockett cracked that facade. She showed that the line between acceptable and unacceptable immigration in Trump's America has nothing to do with law and everything to do with optics. In that moment, she turned the conversation from policy back to people, and not the polished version that Trump prefers, but the full spectrum of immigrant experiences that are too often ignored, erased, or vilified. Jasmine Crockett's confrontation didn't just spark outrage, it sparked a necessary reckoning. For far too long, public figures like Donald Trump have shaped national conversations using selective examples that support their narratives, while dismissing or demonizing those that challenge them. By bringing up Melania Trump's immigration story in a bold, unapologetic way, Crockett cracked open the tightly controlled image Trump has carefully guarded. More importantly, she refused to accept the unwritten rule that Melania is untouchable, simply because of her proximity to power. What made this moment resonate wasn't the controversy, it was the clarity. Crockett didn't speak in riddles or couch her words in political niceties. She pointed out, in real time and on a national platform, that there is a glaring double standard in how immigration is discussed in this country. If an immigrant looks like Melanian white, European, stylish, they are framed as aspirational. If they're from Haiti, Honduras, or Syria, they are described as threats. This contrast isn't about legality or process. It's about optics, bias, and the political currency of appearance. And Crockett dared to say what many knew but were too cautious to voice. Donald Trump's reaction to all of this didn't help. His case had exposed it further. Instead of addressing policy or offering transparency, he raged. His emotional meltdown, filled with all caps posts and personal attacks, wasn't about defending immigrants or values, it was about defending his brand. His fury wasn't protective, it was possessive. And in doing so, he confirmed the very point Crockett had made, that his idea of an acceptable immigrant is one that serves him, reflects well on him, and never challenges the narrative he has crafted. In a media landscape that often rewards outrage without substance, Crockett's stance was different. It wasn't performative, it was principled. She didn't just want to score points, she wanted to make a point. That if we're going to talk about immigration honestly, we have to talk about all of it, even the parts that make powerful people uncomfortable. Her refusal to apologize wasn't stubbornness. It was strength. It was a refusal to allow Trump or anyone else to dictate who is above accountability. This moment marked a shift in tone, particularly among progressive voices, who are no longer interested in playing defense against Trump's aggressive tactics. Crockett showed that calling out hypocrisy doesn't require matching Trump's volume, it requires matching him with truth, consistency, and courage. And if that truth touches a nerve, it's probably because it hit exactly where it was supposed to. In the end, what Jasmine Crockett did wasn't just about Melania, it was about the millions of immigrants whose stories never get told, whose sacrifices never get acknowledged, and whose very presence in this country is politicized depending on how they look and where they come from. Her message was simple. If we're going to honor the immigrant experience, we need to do it fairly, not selectively, not politically, but honestly. And that honesty is exactly what Trump couldn't handle.